I'm William Phillips. I'm the senior pastor here at First United Methodist Church, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and this is Jonathan Harris, our associate.
Please join us for traditional worship here at the church at 8:30 or 11 a.m. or for contemporary worship at 10:55 a.m. We hope to see you here.
If you're unable to attend, you can join us right here at 10 a.m. each Sunday on WFXB Fox TV.
Good morning. I'm Jonathan Harris, the associate pastor here at First United Methodist Church in Myrtle Beach. Today's sermon challenges us to be the church and to all do the ministry that God has entrusted to us. Thanks for joining us.
Our text this morning comes to us out of Matthew's Gospel, chapter 9, beginning with verse 9. As Jesus was walking along, he saw a man called Matthew sitting at the tax booth and said to him, "Follow me." And he got up and followed him. And as he sat at dinner in the house, many tax collectors and sinners came and were sitting with him and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they said to his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" When he heard this, he said, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. For I have come to call not the righteous, but sinners." The word of God for you, the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
Amen. Guide us, O God, by both your word and by your Spirit, that in your light we may see the light, and in your truth find freedom, and in your will discover peace. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. I know you waited with bated breath to see if I was going to sing my pastoral prayer like Jonathan did. I gave mercy. You're welcome. Did Norman encourage that? From the moment he was born. From the moment, in fact, before his birth. Jesus is the living image of the Bob Seger song, "Running Against the Wind." Few wanted him. Then he disappointed those who did because he was neither what they expected nor what they wanted. The changes he brought were not sought by the established, and both resented and despised him for many things, but mostly for changing things. You see, they wanted things to remain as they had always been. They wanted things to stay the same. He seems to challenge in every way the social, the cultural, the structural mores of his day. He seems to be always at odds with the political and religious opinion with his new take on biblical interpretation. And he seems to fly into the authority and the dominant voices that ran the temple and thought they were more special than anyone else. You know, the Sadducees, who thought they were the only ones that mattered. You know, God had called the nation of Israel to be a lamp unto the nations, and they thought they were the lamp. Only they were the lamp. Jesus also had shunned Jerusalem and instead performed his ministry out there in the backwater area called Galilee, where the Gentiles, the filthy, disgusting, subhuman Gentiles lived, and where the Samaritans, those traitor Samaritans, also resided. And instead of focusing his ministry upon the powerful and the demanding, he focused upon the weak and the seeking. He didn't seek out and call the best theological minds of his day, or the famous, nor the powerful, to be a part of his ministerial team. Instead, he seems to choose those who are most likely, choose candidates that no one else would want. And he does it on purpose. He does it on purpose. Maybe just to upset the apple cart, just to inflict the overly comfortable. If he had played along with the privileged, those, in control, those who had the power, he could have died an old man instead of some young radical rabbi. Jesus called the church together from the rabble and the religious outcasts of his day. And that rabble and those religious outcasts went out into the countryside and they preached and they taught and they did ministry, they did mission, and they collected more rabble and more outcasts into the church. And then at Pentecost, God blesses all that rabble, all those outcasts, all those powerless people with his own Spirit, and turns them into a collective religious ministerial group. And they would go out and they would challenge injustices. They would stand beside the powerless. They would speak voices for those who had no voice. And eventually they would topple the most powerful empire the world had ever known up until that time, the Roman Empire. Now, I gently ask this question. What happened to the church? What did we get from that? How did we get from that to what we have become? How did we get from that to where we are today? Well, what and where is the Christian church today, we must ask. Well, first of all, I think we have to say, and admittedly say, we have become comfortable and we have become socially acceptable. In 1958, Jean Deniou, a French theologian, wrote the book, The Lord of History. And in that book, he wrote these words, 1958 now. Among Christian people today, it must be admitted that Christianity is very largely inoffensive, politically, intellectually, and in every other way. But that sort of Christianity will never transform the world. Such, I think, is the nature of the Christian church today. We have become largely inoffensive. And we have become powerless because of that. You look out over the Christian landscape and you'll notice that the places where the Christian faith is growing and is dynamic, it is in places where the Christian church is suffering persecution. In Central Africa, in Russia, in China, in Southeast Asia, the church is bursting at the seams. Only in the West, where we have become comfortable, do we see the Christian church in decline. In the West, we go along to get along. We're afraid to take a stand for the fear of being labeled, or that we might lose some financial support of some offended member, or they might end up going and becoming a member of some other denomination. So we say nothing. We do nothing. And we just hide ourselves away. But that's not like Jesus. He offended knowingly, and in some cases, I think, deliberately. His ministry comforted the afflicted, but it also inflicted the comfortable. here's another stunner for us. Jesus was not like the song that goes, gentle Jesus, meek and mild. Go back and really reread the Gospels. Jesus was abrasive and even confrontational. Jesus was not considered nice for some. The Pharisees didn't think he was nice. The Sadducees didn't think he was nice. The Roman government in Palestine or in Jerusalem area didn't think he was nice. He was not a nice person. And he really never had their support. Then too, the power brokers of his culture, of his society, turned their back on him from day one. Now, I embarrassingly admit that knowing the very Son of God was hated and despised by so many, I wonder, who am I to expect anything less? Who are you to expect anything less? They came to him early on in his ministry, first to smooth him a little bit, to get him into their group. Didn't work. So then they tried to find things wrong with him, things that he may have said out of character or may have made a mistake in, and they could charge him or make fun of him or embarrass him. That didn't work either. So they asked their question, why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? Now that's their way of asking, why is he not eating with us? Instead, why does he hang out with the trash when he has the in-group with whom he can hang? Doesn't he have any self-respect? Does he not know that all that filth is going to rub off on him along the way? Where's his upbringing? Where's his upbringing? They had a point, didn't they? Weren't we taught all of our life that one bad apple spoils the whole bunch, And then somebody's reputation, at least I told my children this, their reputation becomes your reputation. Didn't you tell your children that? Yeah, we did. They remind me of the fictional God Squad in Marvel Comics. You remember Amadeus, who recruited the lesser gods to form this pack so they could go out and fight against a secret invasion? Well, they see themselves as the God Squad, and they're fighting against the secret invasion that changes things, that might alter their traditions or their way of thinking. Yes, they are the voice of God in their own minds, and they believe they're more special than anyone else. Now, these Pharisees were not bad people. They were good people. They wanted to be holy and blameless before God. Isn't that a noble thing? The problem is that they forgot other people. They became cliquish. They became clannish. They became self-absorbed. They cut themselves off from the needs of others. And their chief goal was themselves. Is that not like many today? Especially in this political climate we find ourselves today, everybody else is right and we're wrong. They're wrong and we're right. Huh? Yes. I heard from some ministers this past week. I heard from one yesterday in particular, but I heard last week from several ministers, and they were talking, and I had to agree that they had never seen the Christian church more negative and more angry than it has become today. And the point that one made was that at a church-related school, 2 children got in a fist fight because one told the other that his parents had voted for somebody opposite than the other one's parents. Got in a fist fight. And then one church, in the middle of a church meeting, something like that took place when someone said, well, I supported her and I supported him, and it just broke loose. How much angrier can we get? And we're the Christian church. So the self-righteous asked the disciples of Jesus, why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? Now that, my friends, is an excellent question. Jesus knew who they were. He knew how they were, what they were, and why they were. Did he not care? Well, no, not a bit. He wasn't in the world for the popular or the powerful. He was in this world to save and redeem the sinner. Now let's go back a bit. Just before this scene transpires, Jesus does something totally unexpected and utterly stunning for an up-and-coming rabbi to do. You know, when you're up-and-coming rabbi, you want to get the support of everybody. You want to get the accolades. You want people to tell you how great you are, how wonderful you are. And you do that by telling people what they want to hear and doing what they want you to do. And Jesus goes out and brings into his ministry team a tax collector. A disgusting, filthy tax collector that was thought of as a thief, a traitor, and equal to a murderer in their day. Wow. Now, the Pharisees would have accepted Matthew too if he had transformed and begged for their forgiveness and he had given up his tithes and offerings, but not Jesus. And Jesus creates this beautiful scene where he goes and eats with that tax collector, and we don't know if Jesus is the guest, or maybe he's the host. Regardless, he rubs elbows with the unwashed. He's hobnobbing with the unworthy, and his reputation is getting sullied in the process. There is no way the religious power brokers would allow this to continue without challenging. Now, I find it interesting that when the Pharisees asked their question, they didn't ask Jesus. Have you noticed that? Who'd they ask? They asked disciples. Why? Because they had heard people ask Jesus questions before, and he embarrassed them. He confronted them. So instead of asking Jesus and they getting embarrassed, they asked the disciples the question. Why does he do this? Well, Jesus overhears the question, and he answers the question. Now, I find it interesting that when questions are asked, that you can ask questions in many different ways, and I'm going to simplify it. You can either ask your question in a negative way, or you can ask your question in a positive way. And to paraphrase something that Jonathan said last Sunday, and you can hit me if I misquote you, you discover what you're looking for. You get what you're looking for. So if you're looking for something negative, you phrase your question in a negative way. If you want something positive, you phrase your question in a positive way. For instance, wow. What was wrong with that hamburger? What are you going to say? Well, it was the pickles, it was the onion, it was the chili, it was the bun, whatever. But if I said, wow, what did you like about that hamburger? Instead of finding the negative on the hamburger, you're going to find the positive, right? Yes. You're finding exactly what you're looking for. So they ask, why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? And again, that's another way of asking, why is he not eating with me? Why is he not eating with us? Well, first of all, they didn't invite him. There were hundreds of Pharisees, and as far as we know by the gospel text, there was only one Pharisee that invited him out to eat. And then he complained about it. So Jesus goes where he's invited. Now, I don't know about you, but that's where I go. I go where I'm invited. If you don't invite me, I don't go. Are you a wedding crasher? Anybody? No. If you're invited to the wedding, you go to the wedding. If you're not invited to the wedding, you don't go to the wedding. And that's the way Jesus thought. He went where he was invited. So Jesus answers the question. Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. That tells us that Jesus cared more about those out there, brace yourself, than those in here. That Jesus was caring more for that which was lost than that which was found. It's something we need to relearn, I think, in the Christian church. From the storefront church to the massive cathedral. We have ceased being the church Jesus calls us to be when we're more concerned with us in here than those out there. We're not a self-serving service organization. We're not a self-serving social club. We're an outreach ministry. We're an outreach mission to the least of these. And everything we do in here should be a training for doing ministry and mission out there. We worship to encourage us to do ministry and mission. We go to Sunday school to inform ourselves to go out and do ministry and mission. When the church, I've been in the ministry now for 40 years, and I believe when the church is at its best, it continues the kind of ministry that Jesus represented. When Christ calls us out of meism, out of self-centeredness, and focuses on to the least of these, that's when the church is at its best. Through the centuries, the Christian church has been broken by that meism mentality, where we try to serve ourselves first. And if there's anything left over, we give it away. We give it to somebody else. But thank God, there have been countless people who have broken free of the shackles of meism and self-centeredness and gone out into the world and have performed ministry and mission in tremendous ways. From providing food and medicine and medical care and clothing and shovels and school books and backpacks. They've hammered, they've dug with shovels, they've painted, they carried tons of material, they've cut trees and pulled shrubs and mucked out houses of filth. Their influence in their communities and the world are incalculable. And it's like Billy Graham once said, they have turned the world upside down because their hearts have been turned right side up. You know, Christ calls all of us, everybody in this room, into ministry, into general ministry. You are a minister. Jonathan and I are ordained ministers, so we have a little extra we have to do. But we all have a shared ministry, and that is the ministry of mission and outreach. And it's to the least of these where we're sent. The historian Henry Adams wrote a book entitled The Education of Henry Adams. Duh. And he paints a great tribute in that book about teachers. And he says that when one touches the heart and mind, one can never tell where the influence of that teacher ends. And if that applies to an educator, what can be said for a disciple of Jesus Christ who goes out and touches the soul of another soul? There's a church down in Tampa, Florida that began with only 5 people. It is now 5,000 strong. 5,000 strong. Now, I'm not sold on everything they do. I'm not sold on everything they say. And I'm certainly not sold on all their theology. I hear some things that makes me wiggle. But I am firmly convinced and I am sold on their approach to church and ministry and mission. There is nothing they do that's self-centered. Everything they do is out-centered, directed towards outside of the church walls. And I'd like to share what the minister said. If Jesus got on a plane in one of our major cities, he would say, "Take me to where the people are hurting." He would not say, "Take me to the religious." We need to understand that there's a lost and dying world outside our church walls. We can no longer focus on our ministries of the perfect American family and those already saved. Then he warned, the truly needy are disgusting, they're sick, they're ugly people. They are the 13-year-old pregnant from incestual rape. They are the middle-aged dropout living under cardboard boxes in the woods and beneath the overpass. They are the young cooking crack in basements and standing in line waiting for the next drug handout. They are in our prisons and stealing from your backyard. Then came the indictment. Many in the churchy realm are so busy being a Sunday school class, being a social club, demanding full service from the head waiter, I guess that's the pastor, that they have forgotten the real reason for church and its mission. They have become so fixed on the me first mentality that they have forgotten the very reason for their existence. Then he concludes by saying this. This is the most exciting time in the history of the Christian church. The harvest is more plentiful today than ever before, but the harvesters have just become fewer. You know, he made several great points. Christian church is only declining because in many ways it's become transfixed on itself, the me rather than the they. We are dying because we reach inwardly rather than outwardly. Our evangelism and our ministry, our mission is predominantly toward ourselves. Our mission statement is to make disciples for Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. But before we can do that, before we can perform that mission statement, we have to become disciples, followers of Jesus, acting like Jesus, being like Jesus. Before we can transform the world, Jesus must turn us from selfishness to selflessness, from self-centeredness to other-centeredness. Now let me conclude with this. You remember Anne Frank? Yeah, she's the Jewish girl that hid in the attic that wrote a remarkable diary and was eventually captured and put in a concentration camp where she died. Well, in her diary, she said these words, "How wonderful it is that nobody needs to wait a single moment before beginning to improve the world." I want to read that again. How wonderful it is that nobody needs to wait a single moment before beginning to improve the world. Indeed, why wait another minute to improve this world? Our task is before us as the Christian church. We're called not to take part in this negativism, this division, this rancor that's going on in our nation right now. We're called to be healers. We're called to be ministers to this. We have to rise above it. Let's be the church. Let's be the church.
Thank you again so much for joining us this morning. If you'd like more information about our services, please visit our website, which is FUMCMB.org, or call our church office at 843-448-7164. Thank you.